It's Wednesday, August 20th, and today on Just Wondering, the first of a two-part episode where I introduce you to one of the world's great lifetime adventurers. Karl Bushby is next.
And now, a word from our title sponsor.
Eyeing retirement? We aim to turn your nest egg into a paycheck with half the amount you've been led to believe. Fluent Financial combines in-house portfolio design risk management with income-generating investments designed to aid your financial independence. Our goal is to develop an effective portfolio strategy to help you retire sooner and have a better lifestyle. Fluent Financial can also implement a program that allows business owners to install a cash balance plan, which may potentially reduce income tax payments. You've worked hard to become successful. Let us help develop an effective portfolio strategy that works for you. Learn more today about Fluent Financial. Retire sooner, better lifestyle. For more information or to schedule a meeting, visit fluentfinancial.com or call 972-852-4800.
Karl Bushby is nearing the end of his global expedition. Karl's from Hull in the United Kingdom. For 11 years, he was an Army paratrooper who left the service in 1998 to pursue a dream of being the first person to ever walk around the world. 36,000 miles. What a journey. So many suggested it couldn't be done. He thought it would take 8 to 12 years to complete. This is now year 27 for Karl Bushby. There have been all sorts of delays. He expected to arrive back in his hometown of Hull in the early 2000s, but as you can imagine, with such an undertaking, there have been a mountain of delays. He joins us now from just outside Istanbul, Turkey. Karl, thank you. It's nice to meet you even from thousands of miles away. First of all, I guess I should ask, after a 27-year journey, are you well?
I am very good, thank you, Norm. Yes, thanks very much for the invite as well.
How does an idea form to walk 36,000 plus miles around the world?
It forms slowly over time. And the more people tell you that it cannot be done, the faster that ball will roll. Especially a young paratrooper being told he can't do something, then he's definitely going to go and do it when the world challenges him.
Okay, I can understand telling you it can't be done. Were there some people telling you it could be done?
I think so. I mean, I don't think actually anybody really believed that I was actually going to do this. But I certainly was telling myself I could do it. I did believe it was possible, for sure.
Karl, let's start your journey for our listeners and viewers with a map. You started at Punta Arenas at the tip of Chile. If you would, try to give us what the planned route was.
So, yeah, the route was basically we'd go from Chile and then we'd just kind of bounce east a little bit up into Argentina and then come back west through the center of Patagonia and then at some point cross the Andes into Chile, up the coast of Chile through Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, through the Darien Gap, that little-known section of jungle between Colombia and Panama, through Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and then up through Guatemala, Mexico, up through the Middle East, lower 48, and then Canada, and then, of course, Alaska. Then, by some miracle, we would cross something known as the Bering Strait, and then on down through Russia into Mongolia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and eventually we would end up swimming the Caspian, and then through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and here we are in Turkey, or at the end of Turkey, just about.
Now, Karl, when I first heard of your walk, honestly, my first thought was, besides, oh my God, my first thought was, hey, the world is mostly water. Didn't you have to walk on ice as part of this journey?
We did. This thing is really defined by what we identified as three gaps. The Darien Gap basically links the Americas, and it's the only gap in what you might call the Pan-American Highway. I mean, you can literally drive from Prudhoe Bay in Alaska down to Punta Arenas, except for this 200-mile swath of jungle. That was a gap. It was also a war zone and a very, very difficult place, notoriously bad. So that was an issue for a walker. And then, of course, there's the Bering Strait, which is, in a direct line, it's about 57 miles as the crow flies of crushed ice and water in a very, very unforgiving environment. And theoretically speaking, you could use the ice to cross from the Americas into Asia. Now, as we were putting this thing together and setting off, there was actually a Russian duo that was on their fourth attempt, a guy called Sparrow, and reportedly made it to the United States. So it was doable. So that was fantastic news. So that was something that we could actually do. Just how we were going to do it, we had no idea. But that was a long way down the line. We kicked that can down the road, 6 years before we even got to Fairbanks, Alaska, before we needed to worry about that. And then eventually we'd end up having to cross from France into the United Kingdom. So this was the third gap. And of course, there's a channel tunnel beneath the English Channel. So if we could secure permission to use the maintenance shaft between those rail shafts and those tunnels, then we could theoretically walk back to the UK from Europe. So these three kind of linked the world. I think obviously the biggest one, the big theoretical if, was the Bering Strait.
Karl, what did you do for money along the way? I mean, isn't there food and equipment and places to stay and everything like that? What did you do for money?
Well, at first there was no. I mean, I set off with like $500 in my pocket, and there was no support, no sponsorship or anything. But I knew, and if you would imagine me and my father huddled around a table discussing this before I left, we were fairly confident that if I made it to the border of the United States, then things would change. What I had to do was get there. That was the first objective. And I was quite confident I could do that. But we were well aware that we were going to be going into survival mode at some point. It came pretty early, actually. We were making our way up through Patagonia, and eventually that money would run out. And we knew I couldn't survive in the deserts of Patagonia. So we crossed the Andes into Chile. And in Chile, you can survive quite happily because you're closer to the coast. And it's green and fertile lands. And that's pretty much what we did. We lived off the road. And you'd be amazed. I could find enough food along the side of the road, discarded food from cars, and berries and orchards and things. You could find enough stuff growing that will keep you going for our 30 Ks a day. And that's pretty much how we did it for quite a long ways. Eventually, people started picking up on what we were doing, and individuals would chip in. A lot of Chileans would chip in. They'd stop on the side of the road and hand me a couple of bucks. Mother would have a whip around at the factory that she worked in, so that every now and then I'd reach a big city and they should wire me some cash. They say it takes a village. In this case, it definitely took a world to keep me upright and moving forward. And eventually we hit the United States. On that border, it was in Nogales, south of Arizona. And then suddenly everything changed, just like we'd predicted, because I was stepping into the target audience of a lot of these outdoor companies. And there's not a lot going on for them at the time in the South. And they've been watching you, and you've got a story behind you, and you've basically, you've demonstrated your commitment to this expedition. And then eventually people see you reach the border, and they just pop out of just from out of nowhere, a company will reach out to us and say, look, we'd like to do a deal with you, run your website, offer you a couple of bucks a month to help us with this bit of equipment. And that's how it started. But it was literally bang on the border. Everything started to change. And then once we got up north to Alaska, then we got a book deal, because I've been keeping a daily diary for what would be 6 years once I hit Alaska. So, and my father managed to get a book deal sorted out, and that paid for the most expensive part of this journey, which would be Alaska, the Bering Strait into Siberia, because now you're into some serious terrain, serious equipment, serious logistics, very expensive. And then it was after that, in 2010, after the financial crisis, that eventually found real sponsorship. A couple of guys from Los Angeles with a production company, and they've been behind me for the last 15 years, and they've really got me home.
So they're making a movie of this?
They are putting something together now. We've got over 15 years worth of video footage that I've been taking on a daily basis.
Karl,
a lot.
How'd you keep in touch with your family during this journey?
I mean, it was harder back when. One of the things of doing something like this for 27 years is the incredible change in technology that I've witnessed. We set off, the internet was pretty new. Back in South America, I'd have to find an internet cafe in a town or a village somewhere, which could be difficult at times. And other than that, you were writing letters and sending it home. My diaries, I would scribble on paper and they'd get shipped home, via what we used to call snail mail. By 2013, I got my first touchscreen, an iPhone, and then that's it. You're off to the races, and it's just got easier and easier.
Have you ever been home to Hull since you started this journey?
No. We defined this expedition with two rules. So rule number one was the fact that I cannot use any form of transport to advance. So wherever I reach and stop, if I have to leave that location, then we have to get back to that same location to continue. But we can't skip a bit. Can't use a boat, can't use a plane or a car or anything. Rule number two is I can't go home until I arrive on foot. Now, back in the day when we were putting this together, those were very two simple rules. How difficult could it be? But when those two rules meet the real world, it can get really complicated. When you encounter visa bans and pandemics and financial crises and wars and God knows what else, they can get kind of difficult. But we've stuck to those two rules, and those two rules have really shaped what this journey is and why it's took us 27 years. Normally in an expedition like this, or if you're walking around the world, and it depends how you define that, because it can be defined in many different ways. And technically what I'm doing is not walking around the world. It's like the longest A to B. But many people who will do around the world walk, you can skip parts. You can, fly from one continent to another. Yeah. You can skip a body of water, but I can't do that. So when we run into an issue or a problem, a visa ban or something, we've got to work it out. And I've got to start from where I stop. And if we have to swim, then we have to swim.
Ooh, we'll get to that in just a minute, because you've had to swim. Karl, you have a child. How often have you seen the child during this period? Well,
he ain't no child no more. He's a big boy now. So we've seen him quite a few times. My son's been out. He walked in the Americas, in the United States. On one of those said visa bans, I had to walk across the United States to the Russian embassy while we tried to convince them to overturn the ban. And during that period, he came to walk with me in the States. And he's been out a couple of times, 4 or 5 times now, I think it is, total.
And has your family been able to come see you occasionally?
And mother and father, yes. So they've all come out. They've all come out at times, yeah.
Good. Next, I want to get to what has been the biggest problem time of your walk, okay? You are a Brit, and you were going to have to walk across a significant part of Russia.
Yes.
They stopped you. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a complicated story, but we'll try and keep that short. Crossing the Bering Strait, very complicated. No one had ever managed to get to Russia from America. When we started putting this together, we needed two things. We needed something called, well, you need a visa to go into Russia, and you need something called a propust, which is like special permission to be in the far east of Russia. Because of its proximity to the evil empire, that part of Russia, or Chukotka, was heavily militarily controlled. So even Russians need permission to go there. But at this point, we're sitting on the coast of Alaska across the from the Bering Strait, and time is running out. So we need that winter to try and make our first attempt. We went to a special travel agency to get the visa. We gave them the Bering Strait plan to submit for our visas for Russia. But that company must have thought that we were idiots and clearly wasn't going to walk across the Bering Strait. So they invented their own plan and told the Russians we'd be flying into Vladivostok as tourists. Of course, they got the visas, gave us the visas and our passports back, but didn't tell us that they'd changed anything. So we assumed that the Russians had seen the Bering Strait plan, given us our visas, therefore given us the green light. Now, the other thing we couldn't quite get any information about was this so-called propust. There was nothing available on local websites in Russia, etc. So, and with little time to spare, one of the best winters in like 40 years, one of the coldest winters, so you had the best ice conditions. But I didn't actually think we were going to make it first time. Neither did anyone else. I thought we would maybe hit the Bering Straits a couple of times before we worked out the best strategy. So really, we kind of went for it, really not expecting to make it into Russia. So I wasn't too fussed about this paperwork issue. And if it came to the best case solution, then we'd have to come back and sort out the paperwork before we could continue through Siberia, if that was the case. But that was like the wildest dream, to make it first time across the Bering Strait. Well, we made it across the strait first time and arrived in Russia. And the Russians weren't particularly too amused by that. Obviously weren't buying this ridiculous notion that we'd walked across the Bering Strait. Obviously we were spies and a military background to boot, and it all got rather complicated. Oh, and then the visas were fake. So yeah, it got really dramatic really quick, and we ended up in detention and having lots and lots of interviews with the FSB, and it just kind of got silly. The politics got involved, but eventually it all got worked out, and I was actually allowed to go back into Russia the next year and continue.
Karl,
but it was.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, but I mean, I'd made enemies of the FSB and the border guards, who were still at that time convinced that I was something that I shouldn't be. And so we had a rough couple of years. Every time I would go back, I would be the center of focus for these people. And it was pretty nerve-wracking, pretty uncomfortable.
Could you tell us the point of the journey where you felt most in danger?
Without doubt, that would be the Darien Gap. Crossing the line of contact between FARC, the left-wing guerrilla group that the government was fighting at the time. We had to get through that point of contact at a couple of locations on the route into the Darien Gap, and then getting into the Darien Gap itself. There was a couple of coast shaves where I had to avoid FARC on some very remote jungle tracks. And then I had to make it from one village to the next village that was under siege by FARC to be able to get access to a river. And those were pretty hairy days.
Did you fear for your life during those days?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, there were some great stories out of the Darien Gap. And then once we made it through the Darien Gap, we ended up in jail again on the Panamanian side. because I'd walked into a
Why?
village eventually. Well, the borders closed because of the fighting at the time. This was 2001. It's a very different time and a different place from what you see today. Today gets a lot of news because of the trafficking that's going on through that northern part of the Darien Gap. Back in the day, there was no news going through the Darien Gap because the guerrillas owned it. We punched through the middle of that gap in the most direct way possible. Hell of a journey, a real boy's adventure dream. Getting through that jungle and these rivers and underneath the nose of those guerrillas and into Panama. And then ended up at gunpoint in a village because they didn't know who I was when I arrived there. And then spent 18 days in a series of jails and interviews while they made sure I was who I said I was. Again, very interesting time. And then once they figured it all out, because the UK embassy knew I was coming, but it just took a while to work it all out.
What do you want from your favorite restaurant? Fantastic personal service? A cheery, welcoming, spotless atmosphere? And, of course, great food. The primest of beef, wagyu and lamb, incredibly fresh seafood, lobster, salmon, shrimp, Hall of Fame food from a Hall of Fame restaurant. 2 locations of Bob's Steak and Chop House, the original Bob's on Lemon Avenue, and the gorgeous new Bob's at Craig Ranch, McKinney. Football season's here again. Should you enjoy wagering, I'm again offering my picks of the poll every weekend of college and pro season, beginning with college football's kickoff weekend, August 30th. And the picks are cheap. Just $175 for the picks every weekend through the Super Bowl. And as a bonus, you also get my selections on NCAA basketball tournament games in March. Our record last year, 129 football winners against 99 losers, and 19-11 for the basketball tournament. That's a total record of 148 and 110. If you were a $100 a game player, you showed a profit of $2,700. If you were a $200 player, that's $5,400, and so on. The picks get delivered directly to your email every Friday by around noon Central Time. Again, the cost, $175 for the entire season, plus March Madness. Here's how you sign up and pay. Just go to the link that is embedded in this message. For those of you like me who don't have the foggiest idea on go to a link, just email me at norm1310@gmail.com. That's norm1310@gmail.com. And then my stepson, Zach, will get you all fixed up. Okay, let's sign up. Have another terrific season.
And now a word from our title sponsor. Today's episode has been brought to you by Fluent Financial, Retire Earlier, Live Better, and by Bob's Steak and Chop House on Lemon in Dallas and in Craig Ranch in McKinney. Bob's, a Dallas tradition for more than 30 years.
If you've enjoyed Just Wondering, please hit follow, and a fresh new episode will land in your mailbox early every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. Should you know a sports fan who might like our work, please share our contact information with that person. Just Wondering is technically directed by my wife Mary, who is also occasionally a talent on the show. It's produced by Mike Matern, edited and posted by Ashley Bullington. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Just Wondering. I'm Norm Hitzges, and know that every day I'll be just wondering about something.
And I'm Mary Hitzges, and I'll just be wondering too.
This is a Stolen Water Media production.